Coming up on Arirang News, data show production in the South Korean economy declined in August, hit by the fourth wave of the pandemic. Production was down except in the public sector, but the data could show a pickup for September. The South Korean government is going to start paying compensation in October to business owners who've been forced to shut down because of social distancing. The worst hit could get a payment worth about $8,000. And South Korea welcomes remarks from North Korean leader Kim Jong-Un, who says he's ready to restore communication lines with the South next month. He still says Seoul has a hostile policy toward Pyongyang and that his regime is still threatened by the U.S. It's 5 p.m. here in Seoul. Thank you for joining us on Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. Data show the fourth wave of the pandemic and the distancing measures took a toll on the South Korean economy last month, causing production across virtually all sectors to decline in August from the month before. But there could be an improvement for September because of several factors, including the long holiday. Min Soo-kyun reports.
South Korea's overall industry production inched down for the second straight month in August. According to Statistics Korea on Thursday, the nation's industrial output last month dipped 0.2% from a month earlier, following a 0.6% on-month fall in July. The decline was mainly due to a 0.7% drop in the mining and manufacturing sector, as well as a 0.6% fall in the service industry.
While production in the public administration sector increased, the nation's overall industry production was down for 2 consecutive months, led by lower production in the mining and manufacturing sector and the service industry.
Retail sales, a barometer of consumer demand, slipped 0.8% on month, partly due to lower demand for both durable and non-durable goods, such as cars and food. Meanwhile, facility investment plunged 5.1% on month, marking the biggest fall in 15 months. The decline was led by contractions in machinery and transport equipment investment. It's the first time in 3 months that the country's industrial output, consumption, and investment have all fallen. Experts forecast production and investment to fall next month due to constraints caused by the pandemic and say that if consumption remains low, then that could suggest serious problems.
We had Chuseok in September, so that should indicate a rise in consumption compared to last year. We should also see some increase in consumption because of the relief payments that were made in September. But if the consumption is not sufficiently high, that means we will have serious problems in recovery for the remainder of the year.
Statistics Korea explained that the economic recovery drive has slowed for 2 straight months as production and consumption weakened from a month earlier amid the latest surge in COVID-19 cases. Despite a fall in key indicators, Finance Minister Hong Nam-ki said it's fortunate that the extent of the damage to the economy, especially in the face-to-face service industry, has significantly decreased compared to the previous 3 waves of the virus. Min Soo-kyun, Arirang News.
South Korean exporters say they're looking forward to solid growth in the fourth quarter as the global economy recovers. The Korea International Trade Association, or KITA, says its export business survey index for the fourth quarter came to 106 points, a reading over 100, meaning respondents think exports will improve. This is the 6th quarter in a row it's been above 100, but it's a decline from the reading in the third quarter, which was at 113. KITA said the outlook is positive for 10 of South Korea's 15 main export items, including automobile parts and medical devices. The South Korean government will start paying compensation next month to small business owners who've been forced to temporarily close down their businesses in the pandemic. Those hit the hardest could be eligible for a payment worth around $8,000. Ji-young has the details.
Small business owners hit by COVID-19 will start to get compensation from late October. The money distributed, $3.2 billion in total, comes from this year's second supplementary budget. Finance Minister Hong Nam-ki said at an emergency economic meeting on Thursday that the customized compensation will be made swiftly with simple procedures. Hong said the government will go all out to support small business owners, marginal businesses, and those who are most vulnerable.
During October, under the With Corona scheme, with 70% of the population being vaccinated and forming herd immunity, will focus on the recovery of people's livelihoods.
The government plans to ease social distancing measures under the With Corona scheme, which will treat COVID-19 in a similar way to seasonal influenza. He also said that what happens in the fourth quarter will be the key to South Korea's economic recovery and growth. Meanwhile, at another meeting on Thursday, Hong said that he recognizes household debt, which has grown rapidly in the process of counteracting the pandemic, also poses a threat to the economy. But he pledged to look for ways to help people who really need financial assistance.
We will control the household debt as much as possible, but at the same time, we will look for ways to help people who need to take out loans within the range of their ability to repay debt.
The government plans to lay out the details to manage the household debt in October. 엄지영, Arirang News.
The Seoul city government has announced that it's building 10 more high-tech job training academies for young people by 2030. The schools offer classes on digital technology, including artificial intelligence and fintech, to young adults in their 20s and 30s. The city government hopes to train around 2,000 students a year to lead the fourth industrial revolution with their expertise in cutting-edge technology. The classes will be free of charge, but to get in, prospective students will have to take a test on basic coding skills. The first school is already opened in Yeongdeung-Pogu District, and the next one will open in Gumcheon-gu District this December. The Hyundai Motor premium brand Genesis has unveiled its first all-electric vehicle, the GV60. Premiering Thursday at an event online, it's a luxury SUV featuring Hyundai's own dedicated EV platform called eGMP. On a single charge, it can cover a distance of 451 kilometers. Another new feature for Genesis is the Face Connect function, which recognizes the driver's face and unlocks the door for them without a key. You can also unlock it with Samsung's new smartphone, the Galaxy Z Fold 3. In Korea, Genesis will start taking pre-orders next Wednesday, with other markets yet to be decided. In the Korean market, it'll be priced at 59.9 million won, or a little over $50,000 US. Time now for an in-depth look at the market news this afternoon, and for that I'm joined on the line by Dr. Kim Se-won, Professor of Economics at Ewha Women's University. Professor Kim, good afternoon. Thanks for coming on today.
Good afternoon, Devin.
Well, let's start with Fed Chair Jerome Powell saying that inflation is likely to continue at a relatively high rate for a few more months. That's, of course, what he's been saying for a while now. He also said these inflation pressures are frustrating. Tell us about Powell's view of inflation and what you make of the situation.
From May of this year, U.S. inflation continues to rise over 3% level on year. U.S. Fed actually has expected that this high inflation will be discontinued soon, but it does not fade out over 5 months. On Wednesday's discussion with European Central Bank, Mr. Powell said that a recent spell of higher inflation might last longer than U.S. Fed had expected before. But he repeated his previous expectation that the price surge should eventually go away in the near future. It means that recent inflation is a consequence of supply constraint meeting very strong demand over reopening the economy. But thanks to this high inflation, the possibility of U.S. Fed interest rate hike became higher.
Indeed, and on Wall Street, we've seen the biggest pullback in the market in quite some time. On Wednesday, though, there was a bit of a bounce back, especially in defensive shares, but tech shares on the NASDAQ were lower. What's the story in the global markets?
Major stock indexes in the U.S. fluctuated during a choppy trading session on Wednesday, as bond yields appeared to stabilize before resuming their upward movement. The Dow Jones Industrial average advanced by 0.3%, and the tech-heavy Nasdaq Composite slipped by 0.2% on Wednesday. A closely watched bond yield continued to rise. The yield on the benchmark 10-year U.S. Treasury note rose of a seventh straight days on Wednesday, climbing to 1.54%. All European markets gained between 0.8% to 1.1% as concerns on rapid U.S. Treasury rise weakened. Asian markets were mixed today between Nikkei's negative 0.3% return and Shanghai's 1% return.
And right now, the futures are higher, probably in part because of lawmakers in Washington reaching a deal to avoid a government shutdown. But with some of those uncertainties easing, stocks here in Korea were higher today. We're coming off a couple of rough sessions. Today's gains led by chip makers, tech, and others. Tell us about the local market.
Domestic market have reversed last 2 days huge losses today, but there are still strong concerns on lingering inflation uncertainties and higher U.S. Treasury yields. Kospi advanced by 0.3% and Kosdaq also advanced by 0.2% today. In more details, second largest capital-sized chip maker SK Hynix rebounded 3% today. Internet portal Naver inched up by 0.3%, and the leading chemical firm LG Chemical also gained 1.2%. Korean won was slightly appreciated today. The local currency was traded at 1,184.5 won against the U.S. dollar, down 0.5 won from previous days' exchange rate.
And back to inflation for a minute, Professor. In Korea, we're running consistently above 2% now and above the BOK's target. We're hearing about possible increases in the cost of utilities like electricity, water, gas, and public transport, which would obviously represent more price inflation. What do you see happening with consumer prices?
Recent hikes in the prices of electricity, milk, and possibly in gas and public transportation are likely to fuel inflation by the end of this year. Electricity prices rose recently for the first time in 8 years, and it looks like other public services will be raising their rates in the coming days, starting with gas. This would be the first hike since the government decreased gas price in July last year. Consumer prices have been rising by more than 2% on year each month since April. In fact, Bank of Korea increased its inflation forecast from 1.8% to 2.1% last month. The OECD also raised its Korean inflation estimate up to 2.2%. So if this over 2% inflation trend goes on by the end of the year, this year's inflation would be highest since 2012, 2.2%.
Well, speaking of consumers, another issue the government's trying to deal with is rising consumer debt. They said just today that there'll be new measures in October to limit borrowing. People have been taking out loans for all kinds of things, including to buy stocks. So if they can't do that as much, some say it would have an impact on the equity market. Tell us about that in your own view, Professor.
Financial authorities are scrambling to come up with ways of curbing runaway borrowing as household debt keeps skyrocketing. Particularly, they believe spiraling loans are mainly to blame for the stock market bubbles, since the main part is used to invest in stocks. Finally, on Wednesday, Financial Supervisory Service has made an official alarm on the stock investment financed by bank loan. In July, government decided to cap the amount of the loans per person in proportion with their income and gradually reduce the total debt by 2023. But that has angered borrowers in their 20s and 30s with relatively low wages because they are heavy investors in the stock market. So financial supervisory services should be carefully controlling household loans because it could be a trigger to serious market drops.
And at the same time, it could be a very difficult situation to unwind. We'll have to keep our eyes on that. Professor, thank you for sharing your insights with us today. As always, we appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-Un is saying he's ready to restore the communication lines with South Korea in the coming days. He says his regime has no reason or intent to do harm to the South, saving his harshest criticism for the United States, which he says is threatening the North. Also, Kim's sister is back in the spotlight with a place on the State Affairs Commission, the regime's highest governing body. Paeunji reports.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un made an appearance on the second day of the Supreme People's Assembly on Wednesday, following his absence from the opening session of the assembly the day before. The regime's Korean Central News Agency reported that Kim said he is willing to restore inter-Korean communications lines in early October, as part of efforts to improve relations and build peace on the Korean peninsula. Kim said that the regime has no intention or reason to provoke or harm the South. But he also said that it's up to Seoul to determine whether inter-Korean ties can be improved, and says South Korea must forfeit its, quote, hostile policy before seeking to declare an end to the Korean War. The cross-border communication line between the two Koreas had been cut for around a year, following the North's dramatic blowing up of the inter-Korean liaison office in June last year, in anger over the sending of anti-Pyongyang leaflets from the South. After that, the line was briefly restored in July this year. But 2 weeks later in August, the North stopped answering Seoul's calls, expressing dissatisfaction at the joint military drills by the South and the U.S. Pyongyang has not been answering Seoul's regular calls for 52 days now. Regarding the U.S., the regime's leader claimed that Washington's military threats and hostile policies against Pyongyang have not changed at all and have become, quote, more cunning since the new administration took office early this year. Also at the Supreme People's Assembly, Pyongyang appointed the North Korean leader's influential sister to the regime's top government body. The North's ruling Workers' Party newspaper on Thursday said that Kim Yo-jong has been promoted to a position on the State Affairs Commission, the country's highest decision-making body. She is currently the Vice Department Director of the ruling Workers' Party Central Committee. 배은지, Arirang News.
And welcoming Kim Jong-un's remarks about restoring communications channels, South Korea's unification ministry has voiced hope that they'll be restored swiftly. An official at the ministry said Thursday that once they're back up, the South will first discuss with the North the idea of setting up a video conferencing system in addition to the phone lines. Reactivating the hotlines, the official said, will help address pending issues between the two sides, and the official said the ministry will make thorough preparations. South Korea today reported another 2,500 new coronavirus cases. It's a new record for a Thursday, and it's also the fourth highest number reported since the start of the pandemic. It's looking more likely that the authorities will extend the current distancing measures when they make the announcement this Friday. Kim Sung-min reports.
South Korea reported 2,564 new COVID-19 cases on Thursday, meaning a new record for that day of the week, as has been the case every day since the end of the Chuseok holiday. It was a decline, though, of 321 cases from the day before. Almost 78% of the new cases were in the capital region. The authorities are on high alert ahead of two more long weekends coming up in a row, starting this weekend, which could again see people travel throughout the country and take the virus with them. The rise in cases means the government is likely to extend the current distancing rules for another 2 weeks. A government advisory panel met Wednesday night to discuss what to do next Monday when the current measures expire. A final decision will be announced on Friday. The Seoul area has been under the strictest level of distancing for the past 3 months. And the government once again emphasized that a return to normal life will require people to quickly get vaccinated and for senior citizens to be kept safe.
The recent cases have occurred among people who are unvaccinated, so those of you who have not gotten your shot, please reserve one for October by Thursday at 6 p.m.
Reservations for booster shots for those aged 75 or older will also begin next Tuesday at 8 p.m. If you're fully vaccinated already, it could soon become important to have proof of it, with the government discussing a vaccine passport system.
You can either get a free paper certificate online from the government or get a mobile version on an official app called Kuv. Local community centers also have stickers as proof that you can put on your ID card. Kim Sung-min, Arirang News.
South Korea could soon have at least one homegrown vaccine for the coronavirus, with the government announcing a boost to investment in the sector. The government said Thursday that it's going to inject more than $444 million next year into developing vaccines and treatments, twice the amount this year. The goal is part of an ambitious plan to make South Korea a global hub for COVID-19 vaccines, with a budget of over $1.9 billion over the next 5 years. Currently, SK Bioscience is in phase 3 clinical trials of its vaccine candidate, with commercialization expected as soon as the first half of next year. It's one of 8 local companies with vaccines in the works. In other news, next week, Japan will be coming under the leadership of a new Prime Minister, Fumio Kishida. His election win has a lot of implications, but experts say the tense relationship Japan has with South Korea will not change dramatically anytime soon. Han Sung-woo reports.
Japan's next and 100th Prime Minister was decided in a runoff vote on Wednesday. And the question South Koreans are now asking is what impact Fumio Kishida's premiership will have on the complex diplomatic relationship between the two neighboring countries. Like current PM Yoshihide Suga and previously Shinzo Abe, Kishida belongs to the ruling Liberal Democratic Party, so despite views he may steer the country to the left as a moderate liberal, Korean analysts say Tokyo's hardline policy on Seoul will likely remain in place.
President Moon Jae-in's term ends in May next year, so it will be difficult to expect any major changes in the two countries' relationship right away when one administration is departing soon.
The topic perhaps attracting the most attention is his stance on comfort women and wartime sexual slavery. Kishida, as Japan's ex-foreign minister, was the one who signed the 2015 agreement with Seoul on the Japanese military's sexual enslavement of Korean women during World War II. Now in tatters, as the current administration later embraced victims' claims that the deal was reached without full consent.
Acknowledging the comfort women's struggle and making concessions won't serve the LDP well in terms of public support heading into the upcoming Japanese general election.
Kishida once served as Japan's acting defense minister, but according to Germany's DW, the LDP faction he leads is considered the party's dovish wing, against the nuclear arming of the nation and supportive of Japan's pacifist constitution. From Hiroshima himself, several members of Kishida's family died when the atomic bomb was dropped in 1945. He was the key figure behind former US President Barack Obama's historic visit to the city in 2016. Kishida has said, however, that China's assertive foreign policy has set off a, quote, strong alarm, prompting Tokyo to team up with the US and other allies to counter Beijing's growing geopolitical and economic ambitions. Immediately after his election, the Korean government said it looks forward to developing bilateral relations in a future-oriented manner. Han Sung-woo, Arirang News.
And that brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.